Oh, give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Oh, let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Oh, let me be by myself in the evening breeze. Listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you, please don't fence me in. You know, life is about the journey. It's a classroom. You know, one of the big lessons is perspective, and there's always more than one side to every story. So I'm trying to focus on the positive and have a good perspective, so I'm challenging myself. So today I thought that I would find the positive perspective of my Japanese-American immigrant experience and try and smile and be positive in a little essay called The Pros of Internment Camp Survivors and Their Offspring. I learned a lot from dear old Dad. At 13, he went from a boy on a farm to a boy in a prison camp. They said it was for our own protection, but I couldn't help but notice the barbed wire was bent to keep us from climbing out, not to keep other people from climbing in. Perspective. Now back to gratitude. I am grateful that my family lost their house, farm, harvest, rights, and even the shrine for my grandfather's soul. Because I grew up knowing that losing everything isn't the end of the world. Oh, talk about practicing non-attachment. One suitcase. I am grateful that after Pearl Harbor, little white kids who got the little Mexican kids to beat up the Japanese kids, and they both used to spit on them. Because that taught me that people will do shitty things to other people if they think it will help them out. Perspective. I am grateful that my uncle was a no-no boy. Oh, sidebar. Anybody here know what a no-no boy is? Raise your hand if you do know what a no-no boy is. American historical figure? Okay. When they put everyone in the prison camp, they thought, well, we put them in a prison camp, let's have them sign a loyalty oath. So they had two questions, yes or no. Yes or no, question one. I am a loyal citizen of the United States. Now that's kind of a trick question because unless you are an Asian person born in the United States, you couldn't be a citizen. Tricky. So you could kind of answer that one yes or no depending on if you were born here or not. But the second question was the real meat of the questions because the question was, yes or no, I would fight for the United States in a time of war. And as my uncle said, that's not really a serious question. If they want a serious answer, they can't really ask you that while they have you in a prison camp. So my uncle answered no, no. And as a result of answering no, no, it was also saying he wasn't going to fight for the United States. So it was refusal to give service, which they also had to fight to go into the service. So there was sort of a little catch with that too. Now some of the no-no boys went to actual prison like Leavenworth, and others like my uncle were put in KP duty the entire time they were in prison camp, and they were kept an extra 6 months, and he was probably on a government list for the rest of his life. So he decided that he would always be a lifetime subscriber of Sputnik and Soviet Life, just as a little, you know. So I am grateful that my uncle was a no-no boy because it taught me that even when it seems like you don't have any power, you do actually have some power, and we don't always have to actually comply, and that I know what a no-no boy is, so I can tell all of you what a no-no boy is. I am grateful that my dad spent almost 3 years basically hanging out in the men's crapper at the internment camp. Because he became an impressive card shark because he would spend like 10, 12 hours a day in the men's crapper because it was shady in the summer and it was warm in the winter and he could always avoid his mother. So all the teenage boys hung out in the men's bathroom. And when my dad played pinochle, he wouldn't even give up a trick for years. So, thanks, men's crapper. I am grateful that I grew up questioning the system, because really one really does question a system that puts one's grandmother in a cage. I'm grateful that the camps left my father and uncle with a lifelong fear of the police, to the extent that they would not even call the police when they were robbed. In fact, word spread that the Saito men would never call the cops, so we were robbed like once a month. In fact, local cops used to tell me a funny story about how they all knew it was my dad calling, because they'd get these calls that were like, ring, 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 and they'd pick up the phone and they'd hear, you guys lose color RCA TV. Someone might have found color RCA TV. And the police would say, no, it was one stolen. No. But if you find one and it says Saito, it's ours. We lost it. Perspective. Now, I am grateful that watching them get victimized regularly and do nothing, and how that exacerbated over the years to be chronic victimization, made me rather fierce and gave me a distaste for bullies. Now, Japanese Americans had a saying when they were put in the prison camp, and that was shikataganai, which means it can't be helped. I'm sort of a little anti-shikataganai. Pretty much with petty cowards and thieves and bullies, I'm kind of like, not shikataganai. Okay. Let's see, back to gratitude. Having my family forced into filthy animal stalls at the Puyallup Fairgrounds, moved to 2 different prison camps in 2 different states, taught me to question authority, for which I am grateful, and to study how fear is used to divide us over and over. I am grateful that I knew enough not to let that fear work on me. Now, when I was a little kid, my cousin and I, our dads were brothers, youngest in the internment camp, we used to love to play with those little green army guys. You remember those? Highly NPC nowadays, but back then, we loved playing with our little green army guys. We had a farm, so we'd use the corrugates of the fields as our foxholes. Now, the game was always begun with a vigorous fight over who had to be the white guys, because in our war, Japan always won. See, I'm grateful I learned that anyone can practice revisionism for entertainment. I became a storyteller. Now, divide and conquer propaganda only works if we let it. So history only repeats itself if we forget it. Never forget. Oh, that cousin of mine that we used to play in the foxholes and Japan always won? Yeah, he voted for Ben Carson. And then he voted for the guy Ben Carson endorsed. So, never forget. He kind of forgot. And we don't play anymore because he kind of built a wall. So never forget. So yeah, I am grateful for all the strengths and stories that came from shoving 120,000 people in a prison camp. Now, because they said they were sorry and they wrote a check, but does anyone really remember that the original point of the lawsuit of the Japanese Americans was to get the government to admit that it was an unconstitutional act to round up citizens during wartime hysteria? Or do you all remember that they got a check? Which thing do you remember? The check. Yeah, that was on purpose. They actually apologized and said, well, we don't need to declare it unconstitutional because, cue the music of patriotic music in your head. We have learned our lesson, and we are so, so sorry, and we will never, ever do it again. Here's a check. Now, there's a little place called Guantanamo, and it's been around for almost 20 years, but shh, you're not supposed to remember that part. Never forget. Never forget. So, one thing I do have that I am grateful for, that I appreciate from the camps, is my words. I have the right to use my words, so I will. Now, my body currently debatable. But, well, I currently do have the inalienable right to storytelling. So, here is one last story of gratitude for all the stories, even from the ghosts on the road. For 12 years, whenever I drive by Manzanar internment camp, I let my dog out to take a shit. That's right, and I don't even pick it up. You know, we do write our own stories. Sometimes we don't do it with a pen. Closure is closure. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences, gaze at the moon till I lose my senses. I can't look at hovels and I can't stand fences. Don't fence me in. Thank you.